If there's one thing I learned freshman year, it's that experimentation is key. And over the last 8 months, I did quite a bit of experimenting. I've done a new build video almost every week, featuring a different weapon every time. And because of my current crippling addiction to Remnant 2 and Code Vein, instead of doing another full run in Elden Ring, I thought I'd rank everything I've used so far this year. Weapons up in S rank will be incredibly OP, and make the game a cakewalk, and weapons in the E category will be, you'll be able to beat the game with them, but this is going to be a pretty subjective ranking based on what I would rather use if I was doing more of a casual run, and I'll mention a little bit about my build every time I place a new weapon in. First up, we have the Antspur Rapier. This is one of the few weapons in the game that can apply Scarlet Rot, and was recently fixed in a patch. For the first year the game was out, when you put a Frost Infusion on it and upgraded it past +6, it just wouldn't have Scarlet Rot anymore. So whether you're using Keen, Frost, Bleed, Poison buildup, this is the master of applying status effects. Solid weapon. I've applied Scarlet Rot to so many enemies with this thing before, Melania included. This definitely deserves a B tier at least. Next, we have the Banished Knight's Halberd. This is one of my more recent weapons. I used this one with Stormcaller and a Lightning Infusion. Stormcaller absolutely destroys every single NPC enemy in the game, and the long reach on this weapon made it incredibly fun, and you can use it on pretty much any build. It definitely deserves a lower A tier. Bastard Stars. If there was one weapon in this whole list that I've used all year that I did not like, it was this one. I will give credit where credit is due though. It does make a jingling sound when you move around with it. However, I can't put this any higher than E tier. The Brick on a Stick. While certainly nothing special, it is absolutely amazing about breaking poise, and there's just some kind of energy a weapon that's just a brick on a stick brings to a build. Certainly not the greatest weapon ever made, but it gets at least the top of C tier. The Broadsword is one of the old reliable weapons that I've used in more than one Souls game. There's just something so sweet and familiar with that straight sword moveset, and Square Off is, I think, still my most viewed video right now. While not amazing like the Banished Knight Halberd, I'm gonna have to put this one at the very top of B tier for now. The Carian Knight Sword. I used this weapon for a good portion of my first playthrough of the game, and while not a terrible weapon, there are so many things I like better than it. The Ash of War is great and all, but there are just so many magical swords I would rather use than this one. And when it comes to straight swords, Broadsword is just better, so I can't justify putting this anywhere else other than the top of D tier right now. The only spell I have on this list that I did a build centered around. Carian Slicer is an absolute DPS machine, and if you just have a bit of mind, Lusat's Staff, you're gonna have a pretty good time and a pretty easy run through of the game. A tier. Oh, the Claymore. The Claymore is one of my favorite weapons to use in Dark Souls 3 also. I've used it in my most recent one of Dark Souls Remastered 2. There's no way I could put this any lower than A tier. The Coated Sword. I really like Holy Damage, but oh my, it really sucks in the end game against Malekith and Radagon. It took me 8 minutes to beat Malekith with this thing and 17 minutes to beat Radabeast. While I do love the Ash of War on this weapon, I really can't put this thing that high. Down into D tier it goes. Sorry, buddy. The Cross Naginata, where I turned my HUD off for the entire game, and even with not being able to see my health, stamina, or FP for the entire run, I still had a relatively easy time going through the game with this weapon. With all those facts stated, there's no way I can put this any lower than A. I think it deserves to go right in between Carian Slicer and the Banished Knight Halberd. The Dark Moon Greatsword, the weapon I received from my beautiful wife that I have married well over 80 times now. I love this weapon. I think it's the most OP iteration of this sword in the series, even easier to use than the one in Bloodborne. The fact that you can just use FP to buff it and not use any FP to use that Ash of War for 45 seconds, cause massive poise damage, magical damage, and frostbite buildup. This is easily an S tier weapon. I love it and use it at nearly every opportunity that I get. From one S tier weapon to another, this is the most OP thing I've ever used in this game. Unless you find an enemy that's small, has high magical resistance, and is immune to frostbite, you're not gonna run into any problems using this weapon. It's gonna do at least a good amount of damage against everything. Most things like Radagon, Melania, Elden Beast, even Malekith, you can just cast that Ash of War, and it will shred through the HP. I did co-op against Fire Giant with my friend. We finished his first phase in I think 15 seconds. So Death's Poker is the top of the list for now. The Dragon Halberd. This is a great choice of a weapon and definitely the best Frost Lightning weapon in the game. I love spinning Slash and just buffing my weapon with that beautiful Frost Lightning. Frostbite is really good in this game, and the reach of this weapon is a great complement to it. B tier ranking. The next Frost Lightning weapon in the game, the Dragon Scale Blade. If you want to use a katana, there are just better choices that you can make. While not a bad choice, I can't put this above the Dragon Halberd. I think directly below it in C tier is a great place for it. The Executioner's Great Axe was such a fun video to make, since it was a cosplay of one of my favorite Dark Souls 3 bosses. Dragon Slayer armor is just pure testosterone, and the bonus crit damage on this weapon makes it so fun to riposte with. Yeah, if you use this, put Lightning Slash on it and pretend you're Dragon Slayer armor. I will definitely be putting this in B tier. Now the Flamberge. I don't love it like the old reliable Claymore, but a good occult infusion on this thing gives ridiculous bleed buildup. I think putting it right in between the Broadsword with its great Ash of War square-off and the Anspur Rapier with its Scarlet Rot buildup is a great place for it. What a fun weapon to use. The Godskin Peeler has its places that you can use it, but using it against Moog and Godskin Duo, especially with the fire aspect infusion I had on it, that was not a great time. While Twin Blades are fun, and this is not a bad weapon to use, I think it's the worst pretty good weapon you can use on this list. So I will be putting it at the bottom of C tier. The Golden Order Greatsword. I love holy damage, I really do, but it's just not that good. This Ash of War is so much fun. It still mainly scales off of Faith though, and you're still mainly going to be doing holy damage. So I believe right ahead of the Coated Sword is a great place for it to sit in D tier. Bandit's Knife. It doesn't have the best crit multiplier in the game like the Misericord, and it doesn't have an amazing Ash of War like the Blade of Calling or the Black Knife. So while not the worst weapon in the game, I would still rather use something like the Carian Knight Sword over this thing. D tier. A Great Mace. From the Vort build I just did, using Chilling Mist on this thing is so much fun. If you ask me tomorrow, I might put this right ahead of the Brick Hammer. But for right now, I'm in more of a Ooga Booga mood. While the Great Mace is a great weapon, I think I have to put it right behind the Brick Hammer in C tier for now. The Lordsworn Greatsword. Not amazing, not terrible either. In that upward cut Ash of War, it's really fun to use against Renala and Melania. And a non-100 crit multiplier on top of that too. This is a very middle of the road weapon, so I think it's very deserving of a C tier. Marika's Hammer. Whenever anyone says Marika's Hammer in a video, someone mentioned this in a comment section, it always comes up as America's Hammer in the closed captions. I'm sure it did for this video too. While it does holy damage, it is primarily a strength scaling weapon, and its damage will certainly fall off later in the game, but it's a hammer and does plenty of poise damage, and of course that Ash of War is amazing. I'll be putting it above the Coated Sword and Golden Order Greatsword into C tier. The Meteoric Ore Blade is probably the most underwhelming katana. It scales off of strength, but if you want a strength scaling katana, you can just heavy infuse the Uchi, and if you want a magical katana, you can just use Moonveil, and the Ash of War is not unique on it, so it's just really underwhelming. I like that charged R2 attack. With only that to go for it, I can't justify putting this any higher than D tier. The Misericord. It does one thing really, really well. It has the highest crit multiplier in the game, and I haven't played with it yet after patch 110, since critical damage has been buffed. So I might have to reevaluate this thing. On top of that, it is also the longest dagger in the game. So I think C tier right behind that Great Mace, but in front of the Lordsworn Greatsword is a great place for it at the moment. Morgott's Cursed Sword. This Ash of War is so much fun to use. And the sound the sword makes when you swing it from horseback is so fun to listen to. Overall, a very solid weapon. I would rather use something like the Flamberge and the Anspur Rapier over this thing, so I think the middle of B tier is a great place to put it. Oh, the Pickaxe. I did a wonderful Minecraft cosplay using this thing. It is a great hammer like the Brick Hammer and Great Mace, but the thrust damage it deals is so nice. So I will be putting it right ahead of the other great hammers at the bottom of B tier. And the Uchigatana. It's not on the same tier as Death's Poker or the Dark Moon Greatsword, but this is another beautiful, all-reliable weapon. I used this in my first run-through of Dark Souls 3, and it was so much fun. It would probably be an S tier if it still had a weapon art that included a parry. But as for Elden Ring, I gotta put it right at the top of A tier. I love this weapon, and I've used it on at least 6 runs through the game so far. And last but not least, the Zweihander. I actually did 2 different Zweihander builds with this. I used it with Cragblade and Giant Hunt on a Lightning Infusion, one for poise breaking, and one for knocking Melania and Renala straight up in the air. Overall, a wonderful weapon. It was my first playthrough of Dark Souls 1 weapon, and I could not have chosen a better weapon for it. For Elden Ring, I'll put it right next to the Uchi, because it is another beautiful all-reliable. Well, gentlemen, that's all she wrote. This is my final tier list of all the PvE run-throughs of the game I've done so far. If you disagree, be sure to let me know in the comments section of what I should and should not be moving around here. I am pretty confident with my S and E tier rankings, but I can definitely be convinced to move stuff around in the middle. Perhaps next week I won't be completely addicted to other video games and will give you yet another wonderful build guide for Elden Ring.